Hello, and welcome to On Air with Akin Gump. I'm your host, Jose Garriga. Pro bono work is something that a number of in-house legal departments and outside counsel have undertaken in partnership for years. In fact, the Pro Bono Institute in 2018 reported over 90% of in-house legal departments partner with law firms to do pro bono work. We have with us today Akin Gump's pro bono partner, Steven Schulman, Rick McMurtry, Senior Vice President and Associate General Counsel at WarnerMedia, and Jay Reidy, Assistant Vice President and Senior Legal Counsel at AT&T. They'll be speaking about pro bono partnerships between law firms and in-house legal departments, the benefits to pro bono clients and to the lawyers who form these partnerships, and how Akin Gump and AT&T have joined together to perform this vital work. Welcome to the podcast. Steve, Rick, Jay, thank you all for making time to appear on the show today. Let's kick this off by talking a bit about AT&T's pro bono practice. Jay, could you tell us how did it develop and what's its focus been over the last several years?
Thanks, Jose, and thanks to Steve and to Akin Gump, and I'm really happy to join in on this podcast and to tell you a little bit about what AT&T does in this area, and with Rick McMurtry. Let me start out by saying, AT&T is as everybody knows, an extremely large company, and we're globally deployed. We're a national legal presence, a very large legal department, and it's only natural, I think, that legal department has as one of its core values, a very strong commitment to not only public service, but pro bono service. That really is extended out through a number of different, it's something I could talk about far longer than this podcast, so many different areas. The things I guess I'd first point out, to the listeners is we operate both on kind of a national and local level. So Rick and I are two of the co-chairs of our national pro bono practice, along with Mark Krause and Belinda Bolinger, as you mentioned. We operate at the national level, but really the key to our pro bono practice is local. We have local programs in our many various offices, not only in Dallas in our headquarters where we engage, so effectively with Akin Gump, but in other places, but, in Chicago and Atlanta and Los Angeles and Washington and DC and in many different areas of the company. And the reason I mention that is because it is the local interest of lawyers that really generate the activity. So what we think works best in our program at a pro bono level is where you have lawyer interests and professional interests starting the ball rolling. And that bears out. We see programs individualized in each of those locations that I just mentioned. In Chicago, where I operate, we have a very strong immigration asylum practice and a practice with the Equip for Equality organization representing individuals for disability rights. Rick will tell us a little bit about, where it goes in Atlanta. And so, I'd point out that Rick comes from us from the AT&T acquisition or a merger with Time Warner, now WarnerMedia. And that brought a huge and immensely effective and history of pro bono practice that, kind of adds to it. I'll end by saying, and before I kind of throw some of this back over to Rick, as I said, it's a local practice where we have local initiatives by lawyers and paraprofessionals in these offices and in our headquarters and even globally. But at the national level, we then join, those interests into hopefully kind of work and values across a stream of different types of activities, veterans benefits, the equal justice and initiatives that we have ongoing, both through Equal Justice Works and with entities like the Equal Justice Initiative, prisoner rights cases. And those national programs are, if you will, moderated and, somewhat managed by the national team to support the locally driven pro bono efforts. We face the leadership of our department as pro bono coordinators and attempt to manage those programs through our leadership and with our leadership, and then linking them to kind of the core values of the company at large, which, of course, are very broad and very diverse. So it works, in many different ways that we're proud of. I don't know, Rick, again, and Rick and I have now been working together just through the last 6 or 8 months as a result of kind of merging of companies. And it's just an amazing thing to watch and see some of the things you've done as a company and also in Atlanta.
Thanks, Jay. And I, too, am so happy to get to talk on the topic of pro bono. It's the do-gooders of the world out there doing our pro bono work. And I can tell you, so prior to AT&T's merger with Time Warner, which is now WarnerMedia, Time Warner had 3 separate business units: Turner, which is headquartered in Atlanta, which is where I am, and operates various television networks all over the world, including CNN, Cartoon Network, TBS, TNT. TCM, Turner Classic Movies, is always one. It's my mom's favorite. And Warner Brothers, which you probably well know, is a huge film and television studio, and then HBO. And those operated fairly independently, as did our pro bono department. And some of them were more developed than others were. At Turner, I joined an organization called Pro Bono Partnership of Atlanta, which AT&T is also on the board of. And that organization really helped to rejuvenate pro bono spirit in our legal department. I have to give them a lot of credit. When I was at a law firm, there were built-in pro bono opportunities, and those didn't exist when I first got to Turner. It just, if you wanted to do some pro bono work, great, but the company didn't necessarily facilitate that. And having partner organizations like Pro Bono Partnership of Atlanta, Georgia Lawyers for the Arts, Kids in Need of Defense, Georgia Asylum and Immigration Network, and various others that we've partnered with all over the years has sort of allowed us to formalize that program a little bit more and make those opportunities more readily available to our department members. And as a result, we've had over 80 attorneys and other legal professionals volunteer for more than 300 matters in the last 10 to 12 years. And so we're rightfully, I think, proud of our pro bono culture within WarnerMedia. And the same is true at Warner Brothers and HBO, although I know far less about how their pro bono programs evolved. And what's been exciting since AT&T has acquired us is that we've been able to work more closely with our AT&T colleagues and have started to do some broader initiatives that we couldn't have accomplished, on our own as a single organization, and also sort of looked at some of the programs where we do overlap and see if we can have more powerful influence or impact, I should say, on those organizations like Pro Bono Partnership of Atlanta and some of the immigration projects. And Jay's right that most of our projects are from the ground up. If you have an individual interest, then that is something that, we're going to support, hopefully, as it aligns with our corporate ideals. I know a few years ago, we had many attorneys interested in helping with immigration projects. And that's when we really sort of evolved our relationship with some of those organizations. And so attorneys get the opportunity to pick and choose their pro bono projects based upon their interests and their skill sets.
Thank you both. Steve, let me turn to you now, please. Can you tell us about how Akin Gump has partnered with clients on pro bono, and specifically how the firm's relationship with AT&T began?
Sure. Jose, let me take even a step back. And what Jay and Rick were talking about a bit is kind of the evolution of pro bono on the in-house side. As you know, I've been with Akin Gump since 2006 and have had the great pleasure of focusing full-time on building and developing our pro bono practice. And in that time, I've seen in-house counsel really start to develop pro bono. In a lot of ways, it mirrors the growth during my career in pro bono. I graduated law school in 1994 when pro bono really was catch as catch can. There wasn't a lot going on then at law firms or in-house counsel. There was some going on. I don't want to dismiss that at all. But back then in the mid-90s, the Pro Bono Institute started to focus on law firms and started this law firm pro bono challenge and said to firms, we want you to commit to doing at least 60 hours per lawyer, or 100, even 100 hours per lawyer. And the lawyers that joined in on that, and many, many did, eventually many of them went in-house. And so the Pro Bono Institute then started the Corporate Pro Bono Project several years after and was encouraging in-house counsel to do pro bono work. And many of those counsel, again, had come from law firms and had done pro bono at law firms and then decided they wanted to continue it in-house. So it's a trend that we have seen across the industry. Here at Akin Gump, we've worked with a number of clients over the years, and the way that I view it as our pro bono partner is that with our commercial clients, I really want to be able to offer them our expertise in developing and managing pro bono programs. As you heard from Jay and Rick, there's certainly a lot of expertise they have in-house, but neither Jay nor Rick are able to spend full time working on pro bono. And so they rely on us as outside counsel to come to them with ideas, to help them with best practices and management. In terms of some of the organizations we've worked with, they have ranged from the very large. We years ago helped Walmart, which has hundreds of lawyers, mainly located in Arkansas, develop their pro bono practice. We started really from the ground up. They had done a little bit of pro bono, but we helped them develop their internal pro bono policies, We helped them set up their Signature Project, which is a medical legal partnership with Arkansas Children's Hospital, the first ever corporate sponsored medical legal partnership. We drafted all the partnership agreements for that between the hospital, the legal aid organizations we identified to partner on that, and then Walmart. And that's been going on now for more than a decade, Jose. So then it goes to even the smaller in-house counsel departments, like at SunPower, a solar energy company. They came to us in 2018 during the separated families crisis at the border. We quickly went to them, did training on immigration law, and then they joined us at the border to represent separated families. And we successfully united several parents and children who had been separated. So we really view this as an opportunity to work with our commercial clients on pro bono matters and to offer forth our expertise. In terms of our relationship with AT&T, it's a little bit different from either of those examples I used, Walmart or SunPower, because AT&T, from at least the time that I started working with them in 2012, has always had a very robust pro bono program. They have had a lot of mergers over the years, which we have helped them with on the commercial side, and then added lawyers. But as you heard from Rick, even when they've added lawyers, they've often added lawyers who not just add to the commercial expertise, but add to the pro bono expertise of the organization. So around 2013, when the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, or DACA program, started, we started a partnership with AT&T in Dallas, which is at that time where the majority of their lawyers were located, and went out to a high school on a Saturday and did DACA applications for hours with our AT&T lawyers. Many of those folks we represented are still here in the United States because of that. And then the relationship has developed over the years and really has been a nice partnership where we've brought issues to each other. And I'll talk in a little bit about our Equal Justice Works Fellows, but that I think has been really a boon to the relationship. We have had so far 2 Equal Justice Works Fellows that we have sponsored. One, Danica Gonsalves at Veterans Consortium, working on veterans discharge upgrades. The other, Emily Hager, working at Human Rights Initiative in Dallas, working on gender-based asylum issues. So we've been able to partner with both of them.
Thank you, Steve. So let's put those two together, those two halves. So what benefits would you all say accrue to a company from having a pro bono partnership with a law firm? We've described, and in some ways we've described how it works. But taking to the next step, what are the benefits to the company from doing that? And then what makes for a successful in-house law firm pro bono partnership? Rick, if I could ask you to take the lead on this one.
I'll think about 3 different benefits that spring to my mind immediately. Some to the client, some to the company, and some to the firm. The first is just sharing the load. There are certain projects that 1 or 2 attorneys may not have enough time on their plates, really, to be able to handle. And being able to work closely with a law firm that might have more resources to assist with those projects is helpful, because we don't necessarily have all of the resources that we need in-house. I don't even have a Westlaw password anymore. I couldn't tell you how to research anything on Westlaw these days. So I need to lean on my law firm every now and again for some of those types of projects, just from a time management standpoint. The second would be just exposure to one another. This is an opportunity for the law firm to introduce maybe a younger associate or partner who I haven't worked with in the past, for them to sort of showcase some of their talents. It's also a chance for me to kind of get to know some other skill sets that the attorneys that I work with might have that I just might not be aware of, because the project is different than what I might do in my day-to-day opportunity. And then the last benefit I think about is the ability to expand your practice. I participated in a program with a payment protection plan for charities, something that I knew nothing about and would have felt relatively uncomfortable volunteering for on my own. But I got to partner with a law firm that did have some expertise in the area, and I really grew my knowledge of that program as a result. I've done residential leases. I've done, not residential leases, leases for charities and nonprofits. I've done some employment work, a lot of work that isn't in my normal day-to-day responsibility. And it gives me an opportunity to sort of broaden my skill sets through the pro bono work, but doing that in a responsible way where I'm partnering with a law firm attorney who actually is an expert in the subject matter and can sort of help guide me on some of the issues that I may be less familiar with. And then as for what makes a successful partnership, I think you have to have the right project. It doesn't take two attorneys to do a form agreement that you've done 5,000 times in your career. So it has to be the right type of project. And I think both parties coming in, with a shared understanding of who's doing what the responsibilities are. I think, you don't want to be stepping on each other's toes, and you want to be sure that you're, taking on your fair share of the responsibility. This isn't a situation where the law firm does all the work and the in-house attorney takes all the credit. Certainly not the way we look at it. It's really, sharing that work in a way that is fairly divided among the attorneys who are participating in that or the other legal professionals. And I should say that's another opportunity that I didn't mention is we really encourage our non-attorney legal professionals to participate in pro bono work. And that gives them a lot of opportunity to do things that they might not otherwise have the opportunity to do, both from a skill set standpoint and from a relationship standpoint within the department. I've worked with paralegals who aren't on my team, and as I kind of learn more about them, maybe as I have an opportunity down the road, that's somebody that I'm going to bear in mind that I wouldn't have otherwise had exposure to. So I really find a lot of selfish benefits in doing pro bono work and pairing with law firms to do that work, in addition to the obviously unselfish benefit of providing pro bono legal services to charities and nonprofits and individuals that need them.
Let me add a little bit to, if I do mind, Rick, what Rick said, by the way. I think that last point, too, is unquestionably important. There is no doubt in my mind that the partnership we have with firms like Akin Gump and others have led to direct representation of clients who need access to the legal services they have and would not have had it but for the partnership between the AT&T lawyer and the law firm lawyer. And because that's what generated the representation. And we could spend this entire podcast talking about individual representations that occurred, that brought justice in some fashion to the client, or at least attempted to do so, because, and the AT&T lawyer, would not have had the opportunity to work on that, without the partnership with the firm. And that is, people received outstanding legal services as a result, which is what really, drives us all, I think.
Thank you, Jay and Rick. Reminder, listeners, you're listening to Akin Gump Pro Bono partner Steven Schulman, Rick McMurtry, Senior Vice President and Associate General Counsel at WarnerMedia, and Jay Reidy, Assistant Vice President and Senior Legal Counsel at AT&T, talking about law firm, in-house legal department, pro bono partnerships. So we've spoken generally about these partnerships and their benefits. Let's look at one example. Steve previewed it in his comments earlier of the AT&T Akin Gump partnership specifically. Jay, could you tell us about Equal Justice Works and the fellows you've selected and your thoughts on the direction of that program?
So this is, something to highlight. And again, it comes directly as a result of our partnership with Akin Gump. So Equal Justice Works, obviously, is a fairly well-known organization that takes recent graduates of law school. I mean, these are talented, extraordinary individuals who have committed to design and implement programs that bring about, some form of legal service in the social justice in a manner, in some way that is directly linked to a pro bono program. And, in our case, we partner and fund financially these fellows for a 2-year fellowship. They're linked to an organization that is part of their program design. And then the next benefit that comes of that is they then not only get the chance to do these things and to be paid for them and to be supported in them, but they are introduced to lawyers of extraordinary, experience and qualities, people like Steve and the lawyers at Akin Gump, who can mentor them and also participate in the programs. So in the case of our two fellows that we've sponsored thus far, Danica had a passion in the areas of veteran benefit adjudication and design a program. And there were lawyers at AT&T that immediately migrated to those programs, themselves perhaps part of a family or social structure that resonated with those veteran benefit requirements or not, but would not have had the opportunity to work with veterans to obtain benefit results but for Danica's work there. And it continues to ongoing. We got a case result a week ago that was through a partnership with Akin Gump and an AT&T lawyer. And but that AT&T lawyer has since retired. The benefits continue to come about. In the case of our current, and then this is one where I'll turn it back to Steve, but I mean, Emily Hager is our current fellow, and her program is just the paradigm of what I think the program's intended to result in. Without going too deeply into it, as Steve says, she designs programs that bring benefits to individuals facing gender-based violence, gender-based challenges, and or domestic-based violence or challenges, and are fleeing that and attempting to obtain asylum relief here in the United States. There, in the case where Emily designed a program, they were prevented from crossing the border by the current policies in place, and they're in refugee camps, in Mexico at the moment. Emily designed a program that allowed AT&T and WarnerMedia lawyers to partner with Akin Gump lawyers to remotely and virtually, part of our basic DNA at AT&T, by the way, contact and advise and guide them, these clients, as they file their applications for relief. They would not have had this legal resource available to them but for Emily, and to be honest, but for the work we did partnering with Akin Gump in order to be able to do that. And more than, I believe the number is 15 lawyers on our side have participated in this program. That's 15 separate representations in the last 6-8 months, which is, an amazing outcome for somebody who graduated law school a year ago. And, well, maybe it's not. She's capable of that and so many more things, I'm sure.
Let me pick up on something that Rick said before about the benefits of working with outside counsel on pro bono. And I would say one of the great benefits we've had with both Emily and Danica, our Equal Justice Works Fellows, has not been just the work we've done, but actually the selection process. So Equal Justice Works, for those who aren't familiar with it, is a program where they recruit and find young lawyers or about to be law school graduates who propose projects in certain areas, partnering with legal aid organizations. These are new projects meant to expand services. And then they give us, in fact, Jay and I are meeting a little later today to pick our next one. They give us something like a dozen different applications that we get to review. And then from there, we'll interview about half a dozen people. And so this is a chance for us to work together on something that isn't directly a pro bono project. It indirectly becomes one. But one of the most memorable instances was selecting Danica. We were sitting there in AT&T's headquarters in Dallas. We had several people come in to interviews, very talented lawyers. And the last lawyer or the last law student to come in was Danica Gonsalves. And in fact, she didn't come in. She was by video. Now, this was 2016, I believe, that this happened, or maybe even, 2016 or 17 that she came in. Doing an interview by video seems somewhat exotic then compared to now where they'll all be by video. But so she was the last one to come. We were a little bit worried that her proposal she would be disadvantaged by being the one person not in the room and by video. And Danica told this story about representing a woman who had been deployed to Afghanistan in one of our armed services. And Danica had actually been working with Veterans Consortium while in law school and had represented this soldier who had been deployed in Afghanistan, was driving a Humvee, and an IED went off underneath the Humvee, and she was gravely injured, mainly injuries to her leg, was medevaced out of Afghanistan, eventually made her way to Bethesda Naval Hospital here just outside of Washington, D.C., miraculously recovered enough that she was redeployed to Afghanistan. Not surprisingly, when she was redeployed, she started to exhibit symptoms of PTSD and was eventually engaged in conduct that led to her being charged with a court-martial to be separated. And she was separated from the military on what's called an other than honorable discharge, meaning that she could not even call herself a veteran at that point, much less access benefits, including, and this is what outraged us all in that room that day in Dallas, including medical benefits. So in other words, she had been injured in Afghanistan gravely, and had engaged in conduct a direct result of mental health issues she had as a result of that. And our government was going to say that she was not going to get the medical care that she needed. Danica told us how she had undertaken that case in what's called a veterans discharge upgrade, which is what her program was about. And I'll never forget being there with the AT&T lawyers and hearing Danica talk about that. And that is really the essence of what this partnership is. And as Jay said, we could talk for hours about the work that Danica and Emily have done and the people that they have helped. But in terms of our relationship, I know that Belinda Bowling at AT&T and I, who were in that room together that day, neither of us will forget that moment. And frankly, it is a really modest investment for us to make. I think together we co-sponsor a fellow. It costs us $65,000 a year. And when you're talking about a law firm the size of Akin Gump and a corporation the size of AT&T, that really is a small investment, and we get so much back from that. And so one thing I want to say to those listening is if you want to make a huge impact, and if you're an in-house counsel and want to partner with a law firm on an Equal Justice Works fellow, I can't imagine something you could do better that would have a bigger impact. And AT&T has been great about working with us with these fellows. There are some fellows that get sponsored and then they go off and do great work, but they don't involve the sponsors necessarily. It's not a requirement of the program. But AT&T has jumped in with Emily and with Danica, and our lawyers have been thrilled to be able to work with their in-house counsel colleagues who they work with on multi-billion-dollar transactions, and then they get to work on something a little more close to home. And so I think that's been a tremendous benefit for the AT&T and Akin Gump relationship, but I'll just say it's been a tremendous benefit for all of us who have been able to be exposed to both Emily and Danica.
Thank you, Steve. Rick, let me just follow up a question for you on this. It had already been mentioned, which was the Feeding America's Voter and Engagement Initiative. I know that you all have partnered with a firm to do that. Can you tell us a little bit about that project?
Sure, I would love to. As Jay mentioned early on, and I mentioned, most of our ideas come from the ground up. And so there were a number of attorneys at a division of the company called WarnerMedia who said, hey, we really want to support voter engagement. We want to do something about helping to get out the vote. So I sort of took that to our pro bono committee, and we looked around at different projects that we could potentially work on and settled on Feeding America. Feeding America operates food banks across the United States. And we partnered with a firm to do two aspects of the project, but one I'd like to focus on is FAQ section for each one of these food banks to answer questions from their constituents about voting. We needed to look at state law in 26 different states. And we had about 2 weeks to do it because the election was coming and we had to get these FAQs out. And so we had 30 volunteers across AT&T, WarnerMedia volunteer on the project and help to put together these FAQs with questions like, I've been evicted. Where do I vote once I've been evicted since I no longer have that residence? Or I have maybe a criminal record of some kind. Can I still vote? Can I vote by mail in my state? And where do I vote? All of those questions differ state by state, and it took an army of people to get together quickly, get those answers in the hands of the Feeding America volunteers who could answer the questions for their constituents. And I think it was a resounding success and certainly fulfilling to every member of the team who participated in that at both the firm and at AT&T WarnerMedia. And from that, again, it's an area of law that I know nothing about. Well, that's not true. I know a little bit about it. I didn't know as much as I knew after participating in the project. And so it was a truly both fulfilling project from, feeling patriotic and helping people get out and vote, and just enhancing my knowledge around voter access laws and things like that, as well as that of every other volunteer that we had.
Thank you, Rick. All right, so just to close, I think that this question has been answered obliquely and implicitly in much of what you've said, but I just want to see if maybe we can boil it down a bit for takeaways for listeners. Basically, what has pro bono work meant for individual lawyers at AT&T? What really is, I suppose, the benefit? We've talked about the benefit in general. For you personally and for people you've known, what has the pro bono work meant to you all?
I think I'd like to answer that question in two different ways. First of all, what is pro bono work? How has it impacted individual lawyers at AT&T? The first way to answer that question is we can do that pro bono work. Rick mentioned, and Steve mentioned, when you're in a law firm, these pro bono structures are somewhat more available. When you go in-house, you're in a corporate legal department, it becomes less structured and less, visible. And so having these programs available to be able to do this, do pro bono, just the fact that we can do it is exciting. It brings a level of work benefits that goes beyond our day-to-day work, bringing value to the company, but also bringing value to society and honoring our commitments as lawyers, as professionals. It allows us to demonstrate that. There's individual benefits too. I'll tell one very brief story. We have a lawyer in our office whose son has several profound physical disabilities, but still, goes to school. And the lawyer was saying to me at one point, was explaining to me the many difficulties in access and technologies that he faced as his parents tried to gain him the benefits that he is legally entitled to. That conversation sprouted about a year later into a program in our office in Chicago, at least, where we man a helpline for parents seeking legal support, legal advice for the same types of issues where their children are meeting with gaps in their educational plans, physical access limitations, the many things that are encountered by families that are in that position. The fact that we are able to do that work, and also that a colleague sees us doing that work and bringing about the benefits that happen, not, for families and individuals of similar circumstances, it has a profoundly positive, enriching, collegial benefit. It just makes you feel good to be able to work on those types of things and to be able to think that you're helping not only the individuals in need, but somebody and work with day in and day out.
Yeah, I'll echo that. I mean, I think it just feeds the soul, doesn't it, to feel like you're doing some good in the world. And I think one of the great things about the pro bono programs that we've participated in is the variety of client groups that we've been able to service. And I know for me personally, I have 2 adopted sons. My legal assistant adopted her children out of the foster care program. We often partner together to help foster children or organizations that benefit foster children. It's something that's personal to both of us, and it feels like we're giving back because we've gotten so much out of that system. And I relish the opportunities, frankly, to give back in that way, because that system gave so much to me and that it gave them my children. So I think pro bono, it's the least I can do. And it makes me feel like I'm making a difference. And frankly, everybody else who's engaged in it is making a difference. Whether it's as simple as making sure that organization gets their trademark cleared, or it's as important to the organization as getting that payment protection plan loan forgiveness that enabled it to continue on throughout 2020. Seeing the impact of what you do just really feeds full.
If you wouldn't mind, one more story, and that is in our Dallas office, we have a strong set of lawyers practicing in areas of immigration and asylum cases. But at one point, one of the lawyers decided that they wanted to work to bring literally direct benefits to individuals in need. We joined with one of our internal resource groups, Osmos, to collect food, clothing items, all the different things and that are necessary for families to live, to survive. And this spread out not just in the legal department, but beyond to an entire population within the Dallas-based workforce, collecting those things and then transporting them into the neighborhoods and even across the border to those in need. This pro bono activity joined us together with other employees across the company in a common purpose for a common good and to bring benefits to individuals that needed well beyond what even the legal services that we were already volunteering to provide.
Thank you, Jay. Steve, I'll give you the last word here. Obviously, by dint of your work, the value of pro bono is something very near and dear to you. If you could just boil it down in terms of the typical Akin Gump lawyer. Jay and Rick have spoken eloquently about what it is that both they and lawyers at their firms have benefited from and what they've gotten out of doing this type of work. What would you say that the typical Akin Gump lawyer's pro bono experience is in brief?
So I think it's not just Akin Gump lawyers, and I'm very proud of our profession that we have in the quarter century that I've been practicing law have really come a very long way to making pro bono something that we all expect to do. And I think it is in the very essence of what it is to be a lawyer. And whether you're working on a $1 billion merger or working to save someone who's fleeing gender-based violence, what you are responsible for as a lawyer is helping somebody else with a problem. And again, sometimes those problems are incredibly complex issues of tax law. Sometimes they are just more direct issues of how do we get somebody across the border here in the United States. And I think our lawyers, and I know the AT&T lawyers I've worked with, all see that as really just a continuum of who they are as lawyers, not as something that is kind of separate from what they're doing. And I've got to say, I've got a lot of hope for the coming generations of lawyers, not just because of the Equal Justice Works Fellows that we've sponsored, and not just because of the partnerships between law firms and in-house counsel. There's a new organization called the Association of Corporate Pro Bono that has come online that has hundreds of organizations have joined in to have in-house counsel coordinating their pro bono activities, much like we do on the law firm side through the Association of Pro Bono Counsel, of which I am currently co-president. And so I think there is an incredible amount of activity and expectation out there that we will continue this work, not just in our own silos, but really as a broader legal community to make sure that we honor the best of the legal profession.
Thank you. Listeners, you've been listening to Akin Gump Pro Bono partner Steven Schulman, Rick McMurtry, Senior Vice President and Associate General Counsel at WarnerMedia, and Jay Reidy, Assistant Vice President and Senior Legal Counsel at AT&T. Thank you all for making the time to appear on the show today and share with our audience insights into the workings of in-house pro bono partnerships with outside counsel. As I think has been said more than once, this episode could have been easily twice as long because the stories are fantastic, and similarly, the work that you all are doing. And thank you, listeners, as always, for your time and attention. Please make sure to subscribe to On Air with Akin Gump at your favorite podcast provider to ensure you do not miss an episode. We're on, among others, iTunes, YouTube, and Spotify. To learn more about Akin Gump and the firm's work in and thinking on pro bono topics, look for Pro Bono on the Experience or Insights and News sections on akingump.com. Until next time. On Air with Akin Gump is presented by Akin Gump and cannot be copied or rebroadcast without consent. The information provided is intended for a general audience and is not legal advice or a substitute for the advice of competent counsel. Prior results do not guarantee a similar outcome. The content reflects the personal views and opinions of the participants. No attorney-client relationship is being created by this podcast, and all rights are reserved.